If only I could be so grossly incandescent.
The internet has delivered some hot, spicy rumors that From Software, developers of the Soulsborne games and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, are working on a new game with none other than Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin. Fans of both franchises are super excited, and unsurprisingly, the good old rumor mill has spun to life. Like most rumored projects, there's not a ton of actual information, and nothing has been officially announced, but both parties have fan bases that are completely obsessed with lore. As a result, they're going to dive into this stuff like we are. And in the case of Souls, players are so hungry, they'll dive into source code, resurrecting deleted bosses and items, all in an effort to learn more about the world. So we figured, why not break a chunk of that action off for ourselves? We're going to cover the rumors, the speculation, hypotheses, educated guesses, conjectures, assumptions, and offer you guys some good old-fashioned guesswork about whatever this project might be. But before we do that, let's look at what we actually know. You know, those cold hard facts. So this whole ordeal kicked off with a blog post from Gurm, I'm going to call him that from now on, where he mentioned that he consulted on a game out of Japan. Pretty cool. Meanwhile, From Software president and Souls director Hidetaka Miyazaki told a reporter that the studio had 2 new games in development after Sekiro. And we're done! That is legit all we know right now, so let's get to the fun stuff. So keep in mind moving forward, these are all rumors and speculation and just some good old-fashioned us making shit up. All the way back in the Stone Ages of June 2018, Forbes reported on rumors that From Software was working on a Game of Thrones RPG, with people speculating that it would be announced at E3 that year. Obviously that didn't happen, and things went very quiet until Gurm's blog post. Again, told you I'd say that. Shortly afterwards, games journalist Liam Robertson tweeted about a bonkers rumor, and YouTuber Spawnwave published a 7-minute video in late March, giving details on what this new game might be. So yeah, some dude tweeting on the internet does not news make, right? I mean, I do that all the time, and it's absolutely not newsworthy. Well, Liam Robertson actually has a really good track record on leaks in the past. He accurately leaked information about Anthem prior to its announcement, so there's a good chance his sources are legit. As for Spawnwave, their video claims the game is open world and involves traveling to different kingdoms in order to defeat their leaders and obtain their powers. Travel is supposed to include horseback riding, something that none of From Software's Souls games have had in the past. So, kinda like Mega Man, but on a horse, maybe with swords. Who knows, sounds cool. The game is supposedly codenamed GR, which most people believe stands for Great Rune. This may be due to the fact that E_0, a former moderator for the Dark Souls subreddit, registered a subreddit called Great Rune 2 years ago, along with the acronym GR popping up in Sekiro's code. Modder Joseph Anderson dug into the Sekiro config files and found a network path for something called N:_GR. Now we know that Sekiro is N:_NTC, so the general assumption is that this is hinting at the next game. More recently, according to sources such as Games Radar, rumors suggest that the game will take place in the world of Norse mythology, which gives us a lot of headspace to play with. Both Game of Thrones and Souls games take a ton of inspiration from Norse myth, so it would actually be a pretty perfect fit. You got wolves, ravens, giants, and dragons. They all play a big role in all 3 things. Specifically, those inspirations can be felt in characters like Dark Souls' Sif, who's reminiscent of Fenrir, the enormous wolf who, as we all know, will kill Odin during Ragnarok. When Fenrir was captured, a sword was placed in his jaws. Sounds pretty familiar, right? In turn, the White Walkers could be compared to the Wild Hunt, the ghostly group of hunters whose appearance was a harbinger of death and destruction. Yes, it was also in The Witcher 3. Turns out media is just packed with theological references. Your high school English teacher wasn't full of shit after all. But those are just cosmetic similarities. There's actually a bigger philosophical concept that all 3 share, which is pretty cool, and that is cyclical time. In Norse myth, the world ends with Ragnarok. The gods fall in battle, the sky splits open, and the entire world is covered in fire. But 2 people manage to hide inside Yggdrasil, and after the new world is born, they come out and repopulate, starting it all over again. In A Song of Ice and Fire, history is constantly repeating itself, a Targaryen sailing from the east to conquer Westeros, the cycle of winter and summer, a 3-eyed raven who cannot walk. Again, these things just keep happening over and over. In Dark Souls, time is constantly looping back on itself too. Whether you choose to sacrifice yourself to keep the fire burning or to simply walk away, it really doesn't matter. The cycle begins again and you are reborn. In general, it's a pretty pessimistic worldview, but that's why we love it. Not everything can be bright and cheerful. Sometimes you have to lock yourself inside your room and listen to 21 Pilots all day, ignoring your mom's insistence that you come down for dinner. No, Mom, I don't care that it's Panda Express night. I have some emo feelings to work through. Remember when we used to be kids and now we have to have jobs? Thematically, From Software's Souls series and Gurm's writing have a great deal in common, but in terms of storytelling, they're very different. I mean, that's just natural since they're entirely different forms of media. Yes, you're gonna tell stories in different ways. Most of Dark Souls' story is hidden away in item descriptions, NPC dialogue, and environmental clues. Where you find an item may even tell you something about who was there and what they did. This method of storytelling, while beloved by fans of the series, can be pretty off-putting to people trying to get into the series for the first time. There are very few cutscenes, almost no dialogue within those cutscenes, and they're usually there to introduce a boss and really freak you out, than actually move the plot along. Basically, there is a great story there, but you have to read in between the lines in a big way to find it. George R.R. Martin is also known for dropping subtle clues for the audience to find. He's even said that the end of the series is telegraphed in the first book if you know where to look. In general, though, he's a much more traditional storyteller, which, no shit, he writes books. However, his worlds and characters are incredibly well developed and intricate, which is a skill that would merge incredibly well with the implicit nature of Souls' storytelling. As a result, we guess that he developed the story and the world of the game as opposed to a traditional story or plot. So he's kind of the lore master, designing the rules of the world and the characters that are in it, but not necessarily writing line for line the dialogue that you may be getting in the game, which is still really interesting. The idea of combining FromSoftware's masterful level design with Martin's story details baked into it should be incredibly exciting for everyone, whether they're fans of FromSoft or GURM or just like listening to 21 Pilots. Actually, that's a joke. People that like 21 Pilots don't like good media. Got him! And while Great Rune might sound like a huge departure for FromSoftware on the surface, they actually have an incredibly eclectic background that Souls fans may not be aware of. This includes games like the tactical mech combat series Armored Core, the turn-based fantasy JRPG Enchanted Arms, and even the recent PlayStation VR game De Racine, where you play as a goddamn fairy in a boarding school. So yeah, they visited the far corners of game design a few times. Making an open-world horse game where you trot around a fantasy land sounds pretty well within their grasp, to be honest. Not to mention, recent games have shown that they can find a fresh take on what, on the surface, looks like a very familiar game. Sekiro, while it shared a lot of DNA with Bloodborne and Dark Souls, played very differently than either of those games. It was also really goddamn awesome, so yeah, not only has FromSoftware proven that they can find ways to successfully change a game's core concept, but they can also take on wildly new ideas and make them work. Speaking of Sekiro, it sounds like this game will have a similar perk-based progression system, considering the rumors are saying that you'll gain powers from defeated bosses. A lot of rabid Souls fans were disappointed that Sekiro didn't allow for the kind of hyper-specialized builds that Dark Souls offers, so it'll be really interesting to see how this works in Great Rune, if that's even a game. Remember, this is all rumors. Anyway, on that note, let's try to talk a little bit about the actual gameplay, which will be a challenge since we, again, know nothing about the actual game, but we can infer a few things based on what we do know. We obviously don't know what powers you'll gain from bosses, but it's possible there'll be passive traits and you'll be able to fully customize your character around a specific weapon type and combat style. That'd be cool. There's always an element of that in FromSoftware games. FromSoftware also does precision combat extremely well, and they have a formula that's worked incredibly well for them for the last 10 years, so we'll probably see a combat system that, at its core, shares some basic tenets with Soulsborne. You know, the kind of thing where you learn a boss pattern, you exploit weaknesses, you make sure you hit the right buttons at the right time. Although, to be honest, at a point we're just getting so general it could describe any character action game. The biggest difference here is the rumored addition of horseback riding. As we said earlier, this is a first for FromSoftware and adds a whole new set of questions. Combat on horseback is notoriously tricky in games. Quick bursts in speed and large turn arcs make it difficult even in the best games. It feels like developers know this too. I mean, in Breath of the Wild, there's a combat mechanic based entirely around flipping off your horse. Not only does it make you feel like a badass throwing a bullet time arrow in some moblin's head, but it's also a functional transition into a much more practical form of combat. Hopefully FromSoftware can figure this out and make mounted combat much more dynamic and viable than it has been in most games. Judging from the fact that the game will be open, or at least a semi-open world, there will probably be more weapon options than in Sekiro or Bloodborne. That's good news, as Dark Souls has a huge amount of replayability thanks to the near infinite weapon, armor, and stat combinations you can play with. Also just makes people feel like they a little more ownership over the game. This is my man and he is mine. No one else will ever disparage my dolly. So FromSoftware has always been great about rewarding exploration with hidden items, weapons, NPCs, and covenants. We can't imagine FromSoft making a true open world game without tons of hidden items and little discoverables around the world. There's one more rumor we may as well talk about for completeness' sake, but be aware this is from our good buddy 4chan, which means it's completely anonymous and could be the product of boredom and too many energy drinks. The post claimed that there were going to be 3 playable classes: Hunter, Warrior, and Wizard. But even if that's true, this could just be launching pads like the starting classes in Dark Souls, just a little template. And to be honest, it sounds a little boring for a FromSoftware game, and if this game is getting the GURM booster shot of lore, it's probably gonna be something more fantasy-ish, like the Baldric Hunter, the Kravik Warrior, the Dark Magic Wizard, or something, I don't know. The same source added that Yui Tanimura, this is the director of Dark Souls 2, would be taking over directing duties on Great Rune. That actually makes a lot of sense, since Miyazaki's been working on Sekiro for the past few years. Then again, FromSoftware has such a ridiculous production output that I could see Miyazaki directing multiple games at once. There hasn't been any word on multiplayer yet because there hasn't been word on anything yet, but Miyazaki talked recently about his interest in games as service games and the battle royale genre in particular, so you never know. An open world game is much more welcoming to a battle royale kind of setup than something like Souls or Sekiro's sort of hub and spoke layout. Personally, I really hope they do have PvP. It's been a long time since I've been pushed off a building by a guy disguised as a box. Goodbye 50,000 souls, I didn't need those anyway. That teaches me for reversing my hollowing. I'll never try that again. And that's all we know so far, which honestly is basically nothing, but there's a lot of really cool rumors, and we are all huge From Software fans here, so it's really hard not to take the opportunity to talk about it, even if there's nothing to talk about. So we're hoping to see this game at E3, which means this video will be relevant for about 2 days, so be sure to turn into our drunk stream at the press conferences. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at E3, unless we have double vision by then, in which case we'll see both of you at E3. Thanks for watching, everybody!
You may have heard by now that some are calling for an easy mode in Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. That's a pretty spicy topic, I know, but first let's take a look at this clip from comedian Dara O'Brien.
You cannot be bad at watching a movie. You cannot be bad at listening to an album. But you can be bad at playing a video game, and the video game will punish you